love this music. I think we did a really good job with it. How's it going, people? Commanding Philosopher Poison Tongue back again for another week. So, as promised, this week, next week, and maybe the third week after that, we'll be doing a little Blender intro. The background, the animated background you see behind me, with the moon and the sun, the flying stars, that was modeled and animated all in Blender. So we're going to be making another one. A new background that will go with a new song that you have not heard yet, one that we are also going to be writing together from scratch. So that background and that music, you will see the genesis all the way to the conclusion. I think it'll be fun. I'm just chilling a little bit. I had nothing really to say. Hope you're having a good day. I am. It's warm, it's sunny. It's just a nice weekend to relax. And if you're stuck at work, let's get into it, shall we? Let's make sure everything is lined up. I am streaming. Stream quality is excellent. Love that. Okay, let's switch over to and I brought back the Sunset Venom theme. I might switch over to Toxic, maybe halfway through. Depends on how I feel. Okay, so what you see here is Blender. When you first open the program, you can download it for free. It's open source. It shows up exactly like this, with a splash screen in front, but I just clicked out of that. I had some things that I'm working on that I'm not willing to share just yet. But this is the default view when you first open up Blender. And I'm going to first show you, I'm going to go through basically everything I do to prepare a new file. This has been completely untouched by me. I haven't done anything to it other than open it. And I'm just going to go through all the settings that I tend to use the most and just piece by piece, one by one, get it ready for modeling and animating and, you know, making colors and shapes and all that stuff. Just make it easier. So if you've never seen anything like this before, if you've never modeled with anything, you see a lot of stuff on this screen. And it can be intimidating. So I'm just going to walk through it as calmly and paced out as I can. So let's see, can you see the cursor? Yes, you can. Okay. So, what you see here is what you have listed up here. You have a camera, a cube, and a light. When you first open Blender, it gives you these three things by default. Because Blender tries to predict what it thinks you're going to need immediately, what it thinks you'll need first. Rather than trying to cater whatever you have in mind to what Blender gives you, including all the settings that it thinks you'll need, I'd rather clear everything out, set everything up from the ground up. So I'm going to delete the cube and the light, but I'm going to keep the camera. Now the shortcut for deleting anything is you just use your cursor and click on it, and the X key brings up a delete menu where the only option is delete. And then you click that, boom, delete. Click the light, X, delete, boom. You See how they disappeared from here? I'll do Control Z, undo. There they are. And then it's not Control Y, like in Microsoft products for redo. It's actually Control Shift Z. Control Shift Z to redo. That took a bit of figuring out. The next thing I'm going to do, you see this little menu up here. This menu I don't really use unless I need to, and it's rare. So you can toggle that menu with T. Hitting T back and forth. So I get rid of it. You'll see I'm going to get rid of a lot of this stuff. There's a menu on the left that you toggle with T. There's a menu on the right that you toggle with N, as in Nancy. So, let me just see, am I streaming correctly? Am I... Yep, my voice is coming through. Okay, perfect. So I'm actually going to, before I do that, right now all we have is just 3D area and then the camera. So up here you have a couple different options. This here, normally I get rid of, but I think for showcase sake I'm going to keep it up. This is basically your reference axis, your point of where you're looking. So you see this X is red. This line here is red. That's because this red line is the X-axis, lines up with the red color. Same thing for the Y, which is green. Blue for the Z doesn't really show up, unless you have a very unique view, but usually you just see the X and Y. Vertical is just up and down. So how do you manipulate this screen? Well, left click is usually to select different things. Right click is a menu of different things. And middle button click doesn't really do much, but the scroll wheel zooms in and out. Kind of pretty intuitive. If you don't have a mouse with a middle button or a middle wheel, things will be a little harder. Not impossible, but just a little more difficult to get around. If you do need to, well, if you hold down the scroll wheel, you can pan around like this. So scroll up, scroll down to zoom, hold down middle wheel is this. Now if you hold down middle wheel and you hold down shift at the same time, hold down shift, now I can pan across, up and down, rather than without shift, kind of a circular view. Now you notice that my view is, when I circle at least, it's centered around this little, what looks like a small little circular candy cane, this little life raft tube thing that, you know, what are they called? Lifeguards wear. Well, that's your 3D cursor, and that'll come in handy later on. But it looks like you're panning around that point. If you want to pan around a different object, say I want to pan around the camera. Well, right now I'm not panning around the camera, I'm still centered on the middle. You actually, if you have a number pad, I'm going to assume that you do, because I don't really know the shortcuts if you don't. But if you have a number pad, the period, or the dot button, you click that, and that changes your focus. So now I'm centered and focused on the camera. So if I scroll out and I pan around again, well, now I'm focused around the camera, no longer the cursor in the middle around the camera. If I were to add another object, click it, and then press the period button again, I would focus on that object. And then every time I rotate, it will be around that one. So that's really useful for jumping between different objects as you work on them, and then being able to focus on one thing at a time. So you're not always constantly trying to shuffle the camera around and move around and all this stuff. You can just select one at a time, focus, and it zooms in, fills the whole screen, and it's very useful. Now you notice as I'm moving this around, this thing up here is changing the view accordingly. But when I pan, it doesn't change. That's because panning around is a linear motion. This is a rotational motion, and that's what this affects. Now the other thing up here is you see that it actually lights up when my cursor goes over it, meaning it's clickable. Well, yes, it is. It is clickable. So if I click on any of these, that is what comes out of the screen. So if I click X, then this X-axis should be coming out of the screen at me, which means I should no longer see it. Boom. So now I see the Y, horizontal, which lines up with this Y, and then now I see the Z, blue axis, which only shows up if you have one of these direct axis-facing views. As soon as I pan around, you'll see this Z-axis disappears. Ready? Boom. And you can try to get it back up if you want, but rather just click the button. Boom. And this is a straight-on view. Now here's another thing I want to mention, the difference between perspective and orthographic. Now perspective is like this, like a 3D view. I'm going to change this view from perspective to orthographic with the number pad, the number 5. Something changed. I'll switch back. I'll switch again. Now the best way to tell what's actually happening is to actually look at these little squares of the grid. Down here, they're pretty big, and up here, they look kind of small, and that's because they're further away in the distance. As they get further away, they get smaller. That's perspective. Orthographic, no matter how far away or how close, they are all a uniform size. This orthographic view is the type of view that you get when you click any of these axes and when you pan around. So if you were to go around, I am once again in perspective, click the 5, now I'm in orthographic. Now I'm going to demonstrate this a little bit. I'll demonstrate it now. So I'm going to add a cube. Add a cube back. We had a cube before, I'm going to add it back. So how do you add stuff? Hold down Shift, click the letter A. I'm showing you the shortcuts. You could also just go up to here, this little add thing, but he says it says shortcut Shift A. Click. A whole bunch of stuff that you can add. I'm just going to Shift A. And the objects that we're talking about are under the category Mesh. So you can do plane, cube. Plane is 2D, cube is 3D. Circle is 2D, and then you have two options for sphere, which is 3D. A cylinder, cone, a torus, which is really just like a giant donut. A grid, which I've never used, and then a monkey. Why a monkey? Because, for some reason, it's a monkey. Now, to focus on it, again, I'm going to click the period button on the number pad. And now I can pan around, and it is a monkey head. I don't know why Blender likes monkey heads. But actually, I'm going to get rid of that. So X, boom. And I'm going to add two cubes. So a mesh, cube, there it is. And when you add something, sometimes it automatically focuses in on it. So I'm already zooming around it. If I delete that, click the camera, focus on the camera, zoom out, now I'm panning around the camera. Now if I add a cube, still panning around the camera, so now, since the cube is already selected, click the period, boom. Fills the screen, just zoom out a bit, and now you're focused on the cube. So what I want to do is to demonstrate the difference between orthographic, which we're in, and perspective, which we just shifted to, back and forth. It's subtle, but it's a bit difficult to tell when you only have one cube. So I'm actually going to add another cube further away. Now, this cube appeared right where this little cursor ring happens to be. That's not a coincidence. That cursor dictates where you add new objects, among other things. So actually, I'm going to not move the cursor, I'm going to move the cube out of the way. So then when I add a new cube, I can move it out of the way the opposite direction. So I'm going to go here, and I want to move it this way, along the x-axis. One thing I should say in terms of positive and negative, the axis that actually has the label is the positive direction. And this dulled but disconnected red circle just shows you the location of the negative x-axis direction. You can click it, and now negative x is coming out at us, and positive x is going into the screen. You click the x again, you swap. Now if you look, it's very subtle, but up here, you see the x is like in a solid red circle. Click it again, it's kind of in a smaller red circle with a dark red or a black surrounding. That means it's farther away, versus now, it's closer. Same thing here. Y-axis positive is coming out at you. The smaller circle, very subtle, but a smaller circle means the negative x-axis, negative y-axis, excuse me, is coming out at you. So I'm gonna go back to normal, right around here, and I want to move this cube along the positive x-axis. Then when I put another one, it's going to move along the negative. So how do I do that? Well, again, I'll show you the shortcuts, because the shortcuts really help you once you get going. There's 3 things you can do to an object, most often, that people do. You can grab it, you can rotate it, and you can scale it. And there's a reason why I said grab and not move. Semantically, yes, you're moving it, but in terms of Blender terminology, you are grabbing it, or rotating it, or scaling it. And I say grab because the shortcuts are G, R, and S. G for grab, R for rotate, S for scale. So if I click R, I don't need to do Shift or Control or anything. Just have the cube highlighted, which means I clicked it. Press R, and you see there's a little back and forth arrow that my cursor turned into, and a little dotted line that goes to that little orange dot. The orange dot represents the origin, the center of the cube. In this case, the fact that it's also the center of that little lifeboat cursor is coincidence. They just happen to be in the same spot. But now if I move my cursor around, it rotates the cube in the plane of your computer screen. That plane is neither X, Y, or Z plane, because it's kind of askewed. And any transform that you do, whether it's a scale transform, a rotate transform, or a grab transform, while you still have it in this state, if you just right-click, it will undo what you've done. So if you want to see what does this cube look like rotated sideways this way, oh, that's curious. But I don't want to commit to that rotation. I want to go back to where it was. I still have a rotate on it. I'll just right-click, boom, back to normal. Scale, same thing. Just press the letter S, and now you see the arrow of my cursor is no longer side to side. It's along the length of that dotted line. That's how you tell the difference. You're scaling it. Now you just move your cursor back and forth, and you can scale it, big and small. Again, right-click to cancel. And finally, G, grab. Now I don't have an arrow like the others, it's just a kind of like a little game pad. That's because I'm grabbing it. So now I can move it around. Again, it moves around in the plane of your computer screen. Now here's a little something that I wish more 3D modeling softwares did that Blender does amazingly. A little trick that most people, I guess some people don't know about. Normally, if you, depending on where your cursor starts, you scale it, and you can only scale up to the edge of your screen before you have to, if you want to commit to your transformation, don't right-click, just left-click. Left-click, I committed. And then you want to scale again, and scale again. Well, no, you don't have to click re-click, click, re-click, click, re-click. The cool thing about Blender, and this works for scaling, rotating, and grabbing, you can go past the edge of your screen. Now watch what happens to my cursor. Watch the cursor. It all goes all the way to the left, and I keep going left. It came out the right side, you see? Now I keep going, and I keep going, and I keep going, and I keep going, and I keep going until I get as much as I need. I'm not limited by the size or resolution of my computer screen. Same thing for rotate. Rotate doesn't really work because it goes in a circle, but for grab, I zoom out all the way over here, and I grab. So you don't have, your cursor doesn't even have to be near the object you're grabbing, just anywhere, and then grab. And I can go over here, and I keep going over here, and it's still moving, it's still moving. I clicked, I committed, now where'd it go? All the way, there it is. And you see, that worked too. I just did the pan, the side to side. Watch my cursor. Cursor goes to the right, actually goes to the left, comes back, over, and 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 over. So you can completely ignore the boundaries of your computer screen when you're manipulating your window, or when you're scaling, rotating, or grabbing. I wish more software did that, but that makes things so much easier, because you don't have to click, unclick, click, unclick. It's so cool. It's so nice. So I'm going to grab and I'm going to drag it across the x-axis. Now, just as left clicking commits to a transformation, if you have a transformation midway, like in progress like this, here's where the middle mouse, the scroll wheel, the clickable scroll wheel comes in handy. If you hold down the middle scroll wheel, you see, and let go, you see, the blue showed up. So now you see all three axes. So now, by holding down the middle scroll wheel, you are committing, you are binding that cube to move along one axis or another, whichever your cursor happens to be closest to. Right now, my cursor, even though I'm not talking about the cube, I'm talking about the cursor, is on the negative x-axis. So it's binding the cube to moving just along the negative x-axis. I move this cursor to positive x. Actually, no, never mind. It's not the cursor. It's the cube. I misspoke. The cube is next to the positive x-axis. So now let's say I wanted to go to the y-axis. Kind of a combination of cube and cursor, object and cursor. Now along this axis, this y-axis, now along the other one. Again, up and then down. It's a bit weird when you're around the origin point. And it doesn't matter where you move the cube, it still changes. So it could be a bit tricky to get the right axis you want without trying a bit. So there's a shortcut for that. Undo. There's a shortcut for almost everything. If you know which axis you want to move it along, you click G. So my cursor changed, so now I can move it. But now, what I can do is I can actually click the letter on the keyboard of the axis that I want to move it along. So let's say I want to move it along the x-axis. I just click the X key. Now normally that's delete, but because I'm in transformation, grab, rotate, or scale, it registers as the x-axis, not the delete key. So I click X, the x-axis is kind of lit up. Now you don't need to click anything buttons, you don't need to hold any mouse buttons down, you just need to move it over, and you're bound to the x-axis. G and Y. G and Z. Same thing for scale. X. I'm just scaling along the x-axis. Scale and y, S and Y. My cursor was not in the field, it was over here, so it didn't work. Cursor has to be in the workspace, they call it. So, scale and y. Now, just along the y-axis. Again, scale and z, just along the z-axis. So that's a really good way of just controlling exactly how you want to transform your object if you don't want to try to just guess here and there, if you want to be more precise. Now, I like a mixture of being precise and being not careless, not sloppy, but just like more freeform. It depends on what I'm modeling. If I'm modeling like a tool or something where geometry is important, I'll be precise with which axis transforms at which time. But if it's like a very organic, kind of real-life thing that's meant to have imperfections, then maybe I won't really be as much of a stickler for which axis or how much transformations or all that stuff. But if you need it, and this comes in handy if you're trying to use Blender, which is a modeling and animation software, for more technical applications like modeling a part for an engineering or designing a structure for architecture. You could still do it with the level of precision that you need. And I didn't show you rotation. Rotation is a bit tricky to understand if you're not familiar with it. But I'm rotating R, and now if I click X, I'm rotating not along the x-axis. For scale, I was scaling along the x-axis. For grab, I was grabbing along the x-axis. For rotate, I'm rotating around or about the x-axis. So it's like that's my pivot point, and I'm spinning around it. Same thing for y. Around the green. And R, Z, rotate for Z, same thing. So that's the basic shortcuts: G for grab, R for rotate, S for scale. And once you have any of those three selected, you can select X, Y, or Z for whatever axis you want to be precise on. And that's the basic idea. That's really it for object manipulation in Blender. Just those three transforms along any of those three axes. Okay. So, knowing that, remember I said there were two menus. The left menu I pull up back and forth with T. The menu on the right I pull back and forth with N. Here's N. Now, you notice there's three options: View, Tool, and Item. I'm actually going to click Item, and that item is in reference to the cube. Now you see location, rotation, scale, and dimensions. Location is like grab. So watch what happens when I press G and I start moving my cursor around. Watch the numbers in the location field. It's in meters, but it's actually showing me live where I am. Rotation, same thing. Scale, same thing. I can set this, try to get it back to 1, like move it closely back and forth. Or, since these are numbers, just click, and when you click into it, it automatically highlights the whole thing, so you don't need to backspace or delete or anything. I just type 1, and if I click enter, that's it. And then I'll have to click into the Y, click 1, click enter, then click into the Z, click 1, click enter. But what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to press tab, and that moves into the next one. Click 1, click tab, click 1. Now I can click enter. Boom. If I click tab here instead, it moved into the dimensions. Now, what's the difference between scale and dimensions? From a visual standpoint, not really a whole lot. But when it comes to more advanced Blender techniques, especially with animation and other little tips and tricks, the difference between scale and dimensions it can make or break how easy or difficult it is. So, for very basic beginner stuff, it doesn't matter whether you change the X scale. Oh, same thing. What I just do, I clicked in, held down the left mouse, and I can move my cursor. You can't see it. I can move it left and right, and just drag the numbers along. Blender has so many things that just make it easy to use. Drag it along. And then again, with the left mouse button held, if you let go, you commit. And then undo. But if you have the left mouse button drop held down, and then you click the right click, just like last time, it cancels. Same concept applies. Now, if I scale the x-axis up, and then I shrink the x dimension down, right now, they seem to be going similar. They seem to be going one and the same. There is a way, and we're going to get into later, where you can break that one-to-one thing. And that's if you want to transform this cube into anything that's not a cube, or a rectangle, or a box. If you want to turn this cube into a magic wand, for instance, which, we'll do. Let's do that. We'll end up turn this cube into a magic wand. Yeah, I think we can do that. Actually, no. We'll start over. We'll get a cylinder. We'll turn a cylinder into a magic wand, because it's already round along the length. Yeah. So we'll do that later. The cool thing about this, since these are numbers, you can do math in it. So 0 meters, let's say +2. Let's add a +2, press enter, to 2 meters. Now I want to do +2 divided by, actually no, +6 divided by 4, 2. So what's that going to be? 6 plus 2 is 8, divided by 2 is 4. Or 6 divided by 2 is 3, plus 2 is 5. So when I press enter, what number is it going to be? 4, where you ignore order of operations, or 5, where you follow? 5. So you got to be careful, because this does follow order of operations. But that means you can do whatever arithmetic you want. You can make this 2, and then you can do +6 divided by 2, and then you can go in here and just add your little parentheses. Now it should be 4, if I click enter. Boom. See, and who says math doesn't have any impact on art? I'm using formulas and equations to design a magic wand. Funny. But yeah. So that's just a menu if you want to see the exact numbers, if you want to be more precise, if you want to make something exactly twice the size of something else. Just look at the scale or the dimensions of one thing, and then just manipulate the other to make them double whatever these are. Pretty simple. Now another little trick, you see these little lock icons, they look like open locks. If I click, it locked. Actually, if I unclick and drag it around, all 3 of those location numbers change. If I click it and move it around, it looks a bit weird. Because now I locked the X position on the 0. And now if I lock the Y, I'm moving this cursor side to side, but I'm not moving side to side, because I locked them. Just a little neat little trick. If you want to lock your scale, except for the Z, or just lock the X so it just scales in 2 directions. Either one. There's so many tools in Blender to do a single thing. You can do one thing like 5 different ways in Blender. Scaling with your shortcut, scaling with the object transform scale menu, which gives you like that. Or you can manipulate the numbers by dragging them here, or you can type numbers in, or you can scale along one axis, again with the scale and middle click, or you can just scale this by dragging it, or you can lock these two, then do a general scale, and it's automatically locked. There's so many ways to do a single thing that if you forget one and you remember the others, then that's the way you go. Blender designs try to help you out as best they can with what you're trying to do. That's what makes it so user-friendly. It has multiple ways for multiple user preferences. Now, one little trick that's a bit more advanced, but does also come in handy. Remember, I'm going to get rid of the menu. I'll keep the menu. So remember how I said if you want to scale along a single axis, you turn the scale on, and then you hold down the middle click. And actually, I forgot to mention, but once you get it onto the dimension you want, see, if I'm trying to get the red, here's the blue, here's the green, here's the red. I got the red. Let go the middle button. And that little axis changed. And now, you can just move back and forth as much you want, and you have already committed to the x-axis. I'm not holding any keyboard keys down, I'm not holding any mouse button keys down. You've already committed to that. And then right-click to cancel. So let's say instead, I want to make this a bigger plate. I don't want to scale just along the x-axis. I want to scale along the y-axis and the z-axis. So the x-axis is the only one I don't want to scale. Well, let's do our keyboard shortcuts. S and X. That means I committed scaling to the x-axis. If I want to commit to scaling on everything but the x-axis, I do S for scale, and then hold down Shift and click X. And then let go. So now I'm not touching anything. And now, I've committed to everything except the x-axis. I can make a plate, I can make a little rod. Same thing works for G. X, commit to G. G, Shift X, commit to everything except what I clicked. And rotate X, rotate around X. Rotate Shift X, rotating. Maybe that one doesn't work. I'm just experimenting with a couple things. Yeah, okay, so that Shift shortcut doesn't seem to work for rotation, which kind of makes sense. So for scaling along an axis, everything but that axis, you just do your letter short. And you can also do the letter shortcuts on the keyboard are usually the best way to do that. So all these little tips and tricks for how to manipulate things, how to make your life easier, how to make these transforms easier. Middle click if you want to scale one axis at a time, and since there's only 3 axes, just shift click the axis you don't want involved, and the other 2 will be the only ones working. And you could go back and see all these numbers are just changed accordingly. Okay, we haven't even gotten to any of the menus yet, but we're just showing you how to manipulate an object. Now there's one other thing, I keep saying that, one other thing. There's so much to show you, and I'm just so happy to get to show this to people. But the other thing I want to show you is when you have a transform active. Right now I have grab active, now I have rotate active, now I have scale active. If you hold down Control, or if you hold down Shift while you move your cursor different things happen. Let's try with grab. So let's get a view up here. I'm going to put this menu away with N for Nancy. So now I'm going to move it, grab, and I'm going to drag it along the x-axis. Or just grab it around. Now I'm going to hold down, watch the cursor, not the cube, and watch both. They're kind of moving together. Now without changing this motion, I'm going to hold down shift. Here we go. And now I'm going to let go. I'm going to hold it again. So what's happening? Gross motions, subtle motions, coarse motions, fine motions. Whether you want to use the terms gross and subtle or coarse and fine. Not gross as in disgusting, but gross as in large. Like GDP, gross domestic product. I think that's what the acronym stands for. Gross domestic product. I think so. But yeah, so if you want to make a very subtle change, and you don't, and this is too much to control with your cursor, hold down shift, and you can go a lot more precise. There's a trick in Microsoft PowerPoint that works the exact same way. If you want to move an object on your slide, and you want to drag it down, you can press the down arrow key and it'll move like large amounts. I think if you hold down either Control or Shift, one of the two, it moves at much smaller increments than if you weren't holding down at all. Same basic concept for this. Move it around, large increments, hold down Shift, smaller increments. And still your right click to cancel works. Same thing for rotate. Rotate here, hold down rotate, very small rotations. And for scale, scale like this, hold down Shift, much smaller scales. So Shift allows you to more finely tune your transformations. And that's good, again, if you want to be precise, if you want something to line up exactly with something else. Or if you want something, an edge of an angle to be like exactly vertical, you can do it with that way. So that's Shift. Here's Control. I'm going to go G, and now I'm going to hold down Control. You can tell what's happening. It's locking it into finite steps. Now here I'm actually going to bring back the menu. And you can see in the location bar, those three, it's only going whole numbers. It's locking it down. Now, if I zoom in, and zoom in like G again, and hold down Control, same thing. So you can zoom in as much or as little as you want, and it'll do the same amount of step. Zoom out, same thing. Just one whole number at a time, no decimals. Oh, if you're really zoomed out, or if you don't know where you are or where everything is, you're kind of like in mid-space, select, press the letter A, and A is a shortcut to select everything. It's like Control-All for Microsoft, it's just regular A for everything. And again, our little trick with the period, it focuses on what is selected. Well, if you selected everything, it'll put everything you have in focus. So I selected everything, press the period, boom, everything is selected, cube and camera, all selected. So if you ever get lost or spun out or something ends up like upside down or weird like that, just do all, period, and that'll reorient you back to where you're going. So you can never lose anything, because if this, let's say add another cube, oh, that's a shortcut, Shift A, add another cube, there, and let's say we move you all the way over there. And now I forget that I have it, so click A, select all, click period. Now they're all in focus in the screen. Very small, so I can actually drag to select that and then click X, delete it. Now if I click A and period, this is all that's left. Just a little trick to help if you get lost or confused. So, what was I going to do? Oh, right. So, move G and hold down Control. Hold on. G and Control moves in finite motions. Same thing for rotate. Rotate, hold down Control. Finite rotations. And scale, finite scales. Now, something that you can use, instead of looking at these numbers, if you don't want to stare at them, look up here. If you press G, look what happens up here. You see up here it says dx, dy, dz. D stands for delta. Delta stands for a change. So it doesn't mean, even though I am at location 0, 0, 0, that's not what that's telling me when they say dx, dy, and dz is all 0. It means I have not changed my location from where I started by anything. Now if I move it around, it all moves around. If I click X, it says, okay, only along global X. If I click Y, only along Y. If I click Y, if I right click and then click G again, and now I hold down Control, you see the dx, dy, and dz are whole numbers, but the number in parentheses is anything but. That's because the linear distance from your origin, your starting point, to where you're ending up, is just whatever result. So right now I'm 2.8 meters away from where I started, but I've done it by moving 2 meters in the y and 2 meters in the z. Now if I go over here, -1 meter, -2 meters y, -1 meter x, and let's say 1 meter z. So how does that useful? If I wanted to, again, focus on just a single view, and let's say instead of a cube, I wanted this to be a diamond. So I want to rotate by 45 degrees exactly. Well, I can hold down Shift and get kinda close as much as I can. Try to get 45, just try to nail it. I had it for a bit. Or rotate, hold down Control, and now I snap every 5 degrees. Snap to 45. Click. And now I want to do this. Now let's say I want to snap sideways. So I'll rotate, Control. That's 35 degrees. That's 45 degrees. So now I'm at a 45 degree angle on the X side and the Y side. Now let's say I want to do it on the Z side as well. There's 45. So now it looks all sorts of weird. So now again, I'm just gonna bring up this, and you see rotation is 45 on all of them. So I'm actually gonna do 0, 0, 0, and it's back to where it started. Now you notice I keep, when I want to change my direct on view, I keep clicking up here. But I told you earlier that normally I get rid of that, because it just takes up space and gets in my way. That's good if you don't have a number pad. This is really useful if you don't have a number pad or a middle mouse button. If you just have a left click, right click, and no number pad, this is a lifesaver. Because you can click this and drag it with the left click. Here you can do the same thing, hold down middle click. Here you can do left click and just drag it. Same thing. But I normally get rid of that, and I do that by coming up here to this little menu. And if you pick the wrong one by accident, you'll just check them all. The viewport gizmo, navigate. That's what this is called. So uncheck that, it goes away. But I'll keep it just for reference, not for use, just so you guys know where we are. I usually tell by just the color of the axis lines. I know this red means x, green means it's y. And whatever is perpendicular to both of these must be z. I don't always know what's positive or negative, but sometimes I just bring up this and it usually tells me, because very rarely do I have things exactly at 0, 0. If I want this to go like there, and I want to say, okay, period, zoom in, where am I? I'm along the x-axis, negative x, so this must be the negative x-axis. So I didn't need this to tell me. But to each their own. What was I going to show next? I was going to show... Oh, right. Okay, how do I normally do that? So, number pad, again, every key on the number pad is very useful. So we already know what period does. It zooms in and focuses your view. And we already know what 5 does. That's what I was going to show you. I completely forgot. Okay, no cube. Let's move you along the x, move you along the y, positive x. So now here, this cube is much bigger than that one because we're in perspective view. Click 5. The cubes appear to be identical size. This is orthographic view, and orthographic is very good if you want to model something for like engineering or very precise. Now you can tell, okay, despite being far away, I can tell that they're pretty much the same size, the same orientation. And I don't have perspective to skew, okay, is this actually bigger, or is it just bigger because it's closer? Maybe it's smaller, maybe it is bigger. Orthographic helps remove any of those questions, any of that doubt, and allows you to look exactly. So that's what 5 does. Now, I clicked X, Y, and Z to look along the positive of each of those axes. The number shortcuts for those are 1, 3, and 7. So 1, I'm looking along the negative y. But that is the exception. That's the exception. If I click 3, I'm looking along positive x. So positive x is coming out of the screen to me. And if I click 7, positive z is coming out of the screen to me. 1 is negative y, not positive y. Positive y is going into the screen in this case. So from a practical standpoint, just to get a good look, here's my view. Here's what it looks like above. Here's what it looks like sideways. Here's what it looks like on the other side. It's hard to tell with cubes, but that's kind of why we add the monkey. I'm gonna make the monkey bigger. You see what I did? I just Shift A, add a monkey, and then scaled up. Scaled up, click. You'll get real fast at these if you practice, and it's really fun. Once you get over the learning curve, if you know how to do it quickly and easily with all the shortcuts, it's no longer the manipulation of the controls of Blender no longer seems like an obstacle. It really seems just like an extension of your own fingers, and then the real creativity is allowed to come through. So if I click 1, looking head on. If I click 3, and I click 7. So you don't have to guess or try to get like exactly this, or just go up here and click negative. You just click 1, 3, 7. Gives you a good view of everything you're doing. If you're familiar with engineering drawings, they give you 4 views. They always give you top view, front view, side view. Well, those are basically the shortcuts that you get. So I can just take this and put it all in a single thing. So let's say I want to do a top-down view, but I want all 3 faces to look like that. I can model whatever this, do whatever manipulations, color changes, anything to make it look exactly the way I want it to. And once it's finalized, I just, copy it, and I'll get into that later. I gotta take a break because I drank a little too much water. benefits of staying hydrated come with cons of staying hydrated. So I'm going to take a brief 5-minute break for another refill and to, and we'll cut back in a few seconds. Probably not a solid 5 minutes because I want to get back into this. So as soon as I'm done, I'm going to be back. Okay, be right back soon. Okay, we're back. Am I reading? Yes, I am voicing through. Let's see. Yep, okay, cool, we're good. Where were we? Ah, right. It's kind of hard to teach when you gotta go. So, if you like an object and you want more of it, you can copy it. Now, it's not as simple as copy, paste, Control-C, Control-V. It's actually either Shift-D. We'll do that. We'll do that one for now. Yeah, so it's just Shift-D. D is for duplicate. It's not really copy, it's duplicating. Now, D by itself doesn't do anything. I'm clicking D, it doesn't do anything. But Shift-D, let me bring that up. Yeah, so Shift-D is to actually duplicate what you're doing. And you can, again, move it along or whatever. So I'm actually going to duplicate along the x-axis. So I Shift-D, which duplicates it. Now I it automatically switches to, you see the cursor, it switches to a grab motion. So I'm going to hold down my middle mouse, and it's going to move like that. And now I'm going to look at it sideways. Now if I look sideways, this is a sideways view, but this is actually the one in front of me. I need to look at the one behind it. So again, on the number pad, 1, 3, and 7 are your views. I want this one, but I want to see it from the opposite side. I want the other x-axis to be coming out of the screen. So how to flip it 180, you press 9. And that switches it. So now I'm looking at the right one. And that works for all of the shortcuts. If you 7, reverse 7, 1, reverse 1, 3, reverse 3, just by clicking 9. So now I want to switch this, rotate it this way by 90 degrees. So I'm rotating, hold down Control, rotate 90 degrees. So now here in my top view I have front face, top face, now I just need side face. So I'm going to take this one, still in my top down view, again Shift D, duplicate it, and again hold down middle mouse so it moves exactly aligned. And now I want to look at this top down and then spin it that way. So it's looking off to the left. So I won't try to guess ahead of time which view is which. I'll just quickly cycle through. Oh, there we go. So I'm looking underneath, I can click 9, and I'm looking top down, but underneath was fine enough. So now again, I'm going to rotate, click Control, 90 degrees, and I see the 90 up in the top left corner. It's changing, that's how I measure. Now if I do a top-down view, I have front, side, and top. And I can move them around. Let's say move this like that, move this over here, move this over here if I want. I think this is like a good view. Side, top, side, front, top. And then it would be, again, doesn't matter which one, I'm going to duplicate this, move it here, and this I'm just going to rotate. Here's where I want to be a little more finessed, a little more care with this. So I'm going to actually rotate one at a time. And it doesn't matter if you need to, again, you don't really need to guess ahead of time which one you need to manipulate first. It's just a trial and error. But you can trial and error so quickly in Blender that you lose almost no time at all if you guess wrong the first time. What I mean by that is I want to turn it so it's kind of a canted view, and I don't know if X is the one I need to move. So I'll just change this. Okay, I want to move it like that. Then here's Y. I want to move it like that, and maybe a little less like that, and Z kind of like this, and just move it around until it kind of gets what you're looking for. Until it's kind of looking at the bottom left, a little out of the screen. And that's kind of what you're going for. So that's about minus 45. That looks pretty good. And then minus 45 for that one. And then you're kind of like this. That might be a little too much. You're like that. And then again, this is just based on what I think looks cool. And this is usually a lot smaller. So this is kind of what you would have in, in an end. Actually, no, I mixed these up. Yeah. This is kind of what you would have as like an engineering drawing, like a very basic one of a simple object. You have the 3 views, and the reason why it's in this particular order, top, front, side, is because you can measure. I wonder if we can add. I'm going to add. What do I want to add? We'll do that. We'll add a cube. but we'll make it very thin. I'm gonna shrink like this, so it's like a plane. And then I don't have to, but I could extend it like that, or this. I'll just do that like there. And now I'll have it a little thinner, and all like that. So that's gonna be my stand-in line. So these line up, tip of the ear to tip of the ear, and then again duplicate, rotate, hold down Control for 90 degrees. Top of the head, top of the head. I'll move this. I want to move it exactly along this axis, so I'd use middle mouse. So when you label the measurements, you'd line it up so that these are exactly the same. And here's where you could do this. Hold on. Where you can move around, lock it to an axis, and then hold down Shift to do fine motions. And you can zoom. If you really want to be picky, you can zoom in, see the scale. G, X, and then hold down Shift. I'm only holding down Shift. I'm not holding down G or X. Just move around until you're just barely touching. And you can do the same thing here. This is already there, but a little gap. So G, X, and I'll hold down Shift. And like that. And again, you take this, G, and this time, do I want Y or Z? If I do Y, that looks good. So now hold down Shift. Moving like that. And now this one, I think it overlaps a bit. So G, Y, Shift, down a bit. And this is basically how you can align things if you want. And again, even for this, there are shortcuts. There are other ways to do it. But if you ever need to design a part, if you want to go to like a 3D printing, if you want to 3D print maybe a custom controller for a Switch, Nintendo Switch, or if you want to print like a foot that you can fit under your desk if it's wobbly, or if you want to design something more complex and you want to show someone how to make it in real life. Even if not 3D printed, you want to like sculpt it out of clay or out of foam core or out of whittle it out of wood or sculpt it out of, I don't know, stone or something. I don't know what you sculpt out of. If you want to be precise, then just give them this idea, and this shows you kind of 3 views and then the overall view of what you're looking for. It's good for presenting different models, different ideas. And if you notice, if you make like an avatar model, like a VR chat model, if you want to show it off, you always show these 3 views. Sometimes more. Sometimes you show it. Hold on. There we go. Sometimes you show more sideways views. Now, how am I doing this? Well, there's a couple number pad keys we haven't shown yet. So I'm going to 1, which is kind of the front-ish view. And now I click 4 and 6. 6 spins me this way. 4 spins me that way. Now, as soon as I clicked 1, I'm in orthographic view. As soon as I click 6, I switch back to perspective. I can switch back to orthographic with 5, and now they all look the same size. And now I can hold it down, or I can just keep clicking. Same thing for, again, 8 and 2. 8 goes up like this, 2 goes down like that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's about 6 clicks before you get to the next view. Yeah, so you can manipulate this as many ways as you want. And you can just watch that little axis in the top right corner just go crazy. And you can do 2 at once. You can't do 3 at once though, because that doesn't make sense. So yeah, crazy stuff. So now, you know what 5 does. Perspective, orthographic, perspective, orthographic, perspective. You know what the period does. Focuses and zooms. You know what 4 and 6 can do. You know what 8 and 2 can do. You know what 7, 1, and 3 can do. And 9 just reverses whatever you're looking at. Here's 7, reverse, it's 9. Here's 1, reverse. Here's 3, it's reverse. So you know 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We haven't touched 0 yet. Take a look at the camera. Here's the camera. Now how do you know what the camera's actually looking at? You can try to zoom in like this and try to get it right. You can do period on the camera and get it kind of zooming in. That's an idea of what you want. Or you can press 0. Now look what just happened. You have this square cutout and everything inside looks normal, and then everything outside looks faded. This is what your camera will see. If you render your image, if you render your animation, this is everything that's going to be captured, and nothing else. You can zoom in, you can zoom out, you can, as soon as you move around, you leave. You gotta press 0 to go back in. You can pan, that's fine, but you can't rotate. But you can pan around. Now, if you want this camera view to take up the biggest amount of space in your workstation, you press Home, the Home shortcut. And that takes up the biggest allowable space of your workstation. I like to do that and then scroll out once or twice. So these little information, these buttons, these shortcuts, these other stuff don't get in the way. They're kind of kept out of what I actually see, and they're kind of just dwelling in this dark space. So again, home, and then scroll down, just like one click. And that's usually, if I want to check what the camera is seeing, this is how I shortcut. And you click 0, it goes back to normal. So if I want to click all, period, go forward, like 7. Now here, if I'm looking like this, looking top down, now I click 0, here's my camera view, click 0 again, goes back to top down. So it keeps the view that you had previous, so you can switch back and forth. You can switch to camera, go up here, make a change. Switch, oh I don't like that, come back here, maybe here, make a change, bring this down. Maybe I'll go over here, bring this one up, switch to 0, make a change. Or you can make the change from the camera view, actually here. Again, same thing. G, and I middle clicked on Z, middle click on Y, middle click on X. Here, I middle click on Y, middle click on Z a bit. Here, I don't want this in there at all, so I'm just going to move you out of the way. I'm going to keep you on Y. And now, this is, if I were to render this image, this is exactly what I would see. More or less. In terms of where things are, this is what I would see. In terms of the final product, you know, in terms of color, in terms of lighting, in terms of texture, not even close. So that's where I'm going to show you the Z shortcut, the letter Z, like zebra. Z, press Z, gives you 4 options. Solid, material preview, wireframe, rendered. It's blue is highlighted, solid is highlighted, which means that's what we're in right now. Material preview is the exact same thing, but it tries to add in any material choices you've added. We haven't added any materials to these monkey heads, so it's just going to show very little different. But this is the default material-less appearance of a monkey head. It's not meant for like showing the actual shape, but it does get you closer. And then you have rendered. Rendered is pretty close to what you're actually going to see, considering lighting, texture, material, all that stuff. And you see what just happened? It's very dark because we had our light and we took it away. So what happens if we add a light? You have 4 choices: point, sun, spot, area. The sun is literally just like a sun. It's a light that has no real origin, just a whole bunch of rays that come straight down. And you can change which direction the sun goes. You can make it go diagonal, you can make it go sideways. But it's just kind of like a universal lighting. But it does cast shadows and everything. A point is like a candle. It's a point. It emanates light everywhere. A spot is a spotlight. It shines a light in a circle. And an area light is like a window. Where it shines light, it has a bit of a squarish shape. It's not as defined as a spotlight, but it's not as generalized as a spot. And so these are just different things that you can play with. So I'm going to add a point. And again, whenever you add something, it appears wherever this 3D cursor happens to be. So, just to double check, 3D cursor is above this monkey head and kind of off to the side of this one. So I'm expecting, when I add my light, this half of the monkey will be lit up, and this half of the monkey will be lit up. That means this half and this bottom half should be dark. Let's add the light and see if that's what actually happens. Add a point. That's not very bright, is it? Let's brighten it. Or we can move it around. And you see in real time the effect of your lighting. If you switch to material preview, move your light around, nothing happens. If you switch, again pressing Z, to solid preview, move your light around, nothing happens. Because rendered is the only thing that takes lighting into account. And again, you can move it along. Light can be treated the same as an object. You can move it around, you can scale it, although a point is literally just a point. You can't really scale a single point. And you can rotate it, but again, you can't rotate a point to any real effect. For a point light, it's just moving it around. And you can change the strength and the intensity of it later. We'll get to those settings later on. So I'm going to get rid of I'm going to keep the light. I'm going to bring a light here. I'm going to add another point over here. I'm going to move you over here, move you up, move you back, move you, just kind of make it kind of cool looking. And I'll add another point light right around there. Yeah, that looks good. So I just arbitrarily chose those points because it looks kind of creepy looking, kind of cool. So instead of pressing Z and clicking the one you want, you can actually hold down Z, drag your mouse, and let go. Hold your mouse, hold Z, drag your mouse, let go. So if you and the position of these 4 never changes. So if you already know, like I want to do material, I know that's on the bottom. So I just click Z and flick my mouse down. I want solid view, I know that's to the right. Hold Z and flick my mouse to the right. I want the rendered view. And I can just flick back and forth. You get used to it. Now, solid view, the one that we started with, I actually use the least often. I use material view to do most of the modeling, because it shows the materials. I do rendered just as like a sanity check to see, how does it look? How is it gonna look before I commit a whole bunch of computer processors and processing to actually render it. How's this kinda almost finished preview make it look? Well, it's like a check your work kind of thing. But most of my work is in material, or in the one that I haven't shown you yet, wireframe. Now wireframe is probably, between wireframe and material, wireframe is probably the most useful view of those 4 that you get presented with. It's harder to tell. It looks a little intimidating with the monkey head. We're actually going to delete these guys. And I'm going to delete the 3 lights. And now I'm gonna just jump into, yeah, we got time. I'm just gonna jump into setting things up the way I will. I think I've shown you enough of the basics, so I'm gonna set things up the way I normally do. The exception I'm going to keep is this. I'm gonna keep that up. Everything else I'm gonna do. So basically, we started with the cube. Again, here's the wireframe. It's very simple. A lot less intimidating than the wireframe of this guy. Cube is just lines. So we started not in material view, in solid view. And we had a light kind of hanging around here. So if we press 0 and look at the cube, the light was kind of far away. Let's bring it closer. Kind of like that. There we go. And again, if I want to center it, just press home, boom, and scroll out once or twice. Maybe once. So that's kind of what we would see as the basic default for what Blender gives us. So, assuming, well, hold on, this was up. So this is basically what you started with, what we started Blender with. So I'm just going to go through what I normally do. I get rid of the light, get rid of the cube, get rid of this menu with T, and I bring up this menu with N, click the camera, and I don't know where I'm going to view it yet, so I'm just going to put the camera in kind of this default pose. So I'm going to make all these 0. So 0, tab, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. Enter. Now, why everything zeroes out and the camera ends up facing down, I don't know. It just ends up facing down. So I'm actually going to, I know ahead of time we're going to make this into a background. So I want to turn this 90 degrees, exactly, using Control, and I'm just going to move it back by shift-clicking over Y, somewhere around here. Say like -10. You see, in the span of like 30 seconds, we just used almost all the different tricks we spent the last hour and a half telling you about. Because once you get used to them, you can manipulate them really fast. So I'm done with the camera. I can close this menu, get out of the way. And now, finally, we can move on to this panel. Now I'll just give myself a little more room. I'll put it back when I'm done. Here's just to show you. Now start up here. There's 2 panels here, and you can drag them like that. So I'm going to drag this down up a bit. Not going to put anything in it just yet. Now, you have little arrows that indicate drop downs. You have collection, you have camera, and you see the camera is nested inside the collection because it's part of the drop down. Normally, I want the camera to be its own thing, standalone. So I'm actually going to click it and drag it out. Just drag it away. It's still in this window. If I drag it here, it'll add a second one, I think. It'll just move, yeah, it'll just add a second one. So I'm going to delete that. I could drag it into collection, put it back, drag it out, take it out. That's what I do. I keep the camera as kind of its own, doing its own thing. It's independent. It's free of anything else. Now this collection, I have an idea of what I kind of want to do for this background. So what I'm going to do is probably this. I want to model it like a game show stage. So I think that a stage is going to be a part of it. So I'm probably going to have multiple collections, maybe a collection for everything that's involved with a stage, maybe one that's everything involved with lighting, maybe everything that's involved with animated paths, everything that's involved with props, everything that's involved. You can have as many collections in any assortment that you need. All it does is adds a little drop-down hierarchy to your things. It allows you to organize everything that you add into the scene. So I'm actually going to double click and rename this stage. Instead of a double click, you could also press F2 and you can rename it stage. And here you click the camera, you can rename the camera F2. I'm going to keep it as is, but you can add a cube. And you can F2, you can call this box. Excuse me. I had a chocolate protein shake for breakfast. And I'm lactose intolerant. That lactase pill, only so good, only works so well. Now you notice up here, when I added the box, it automatically put it inside the hierarchy of stage. If I click out of it and I add another box, another cube, again, it adds it back in. Or if I click the camera and then click out, add the cube, adds it all part of the stage. So this is just a way to collect. And if you want a new one, just press C for collection. And it puts a collection inside the level that you're highlighted. So this is actually not the right way. Well, there's no right or wrong way to do it. It's not the way I would do it. But this added the collection inside the collection I had highlighted. Well, it was stage. So it added the collection inside stage. So I'm going to delete that. Again, just click X. And now I'm going to hold the master level, the scene collection. Now if I click C, it adds a new collection at the same level. So this one I could probably call lighting. And again up here, I'm going to call a new one, and I'm just pressing C, and I'm going to call this one, let's say, props. And I think that's good enough. That's enough setup for now. So hopefully that was clear on what I did and how I did that. So next up, you see over here, you see eyeballs. So I'm going to zoom in so we can see the camera. Eyeballs. This, I call it a workspace. Blender calls it the viewport, because it's a port through which you view your scene. So it's a viewport. Eyeball is just hiding it. Hiding and appearing it. This up here is a drop down of filter. It gives you all the options that you can have. I just like selecting up to these. And I don't mess with anything else in this menu. I just select all these first 5. And then boom, there they show up. So what did they do? Let's add a cube, again as our guinea pig, to show off. Here's a cube. It put it under props. I want to move it to, let's say, out. So if I want to move it, I like to move it. I'm going to press M. And now I can move to the stage collection, the lighting collection, the props collection, or just the general scene, which is outside of all these 3. Or I can make a new one, call it demonstration, click enter, and then click OK, or click enter again. Boom. It created a new collection and put the cube inside it. If I delete this collection while there's stuff inside it, what will happen to the stuff inside? It just gets added to the overall, to the hierarchy up. Now it doesn't mean it defaults to the overall. I can have here, have another one inside, props 1, have another one inside, props 1, 1, have another one inside, props 1, 1, 1. But the cube inside this. Now if I delete props 1, 1, 1, where will the cube go? Will it go back to the master hierarchy, or will it go to props 1, 1? Let's find out. Let's delete. It just goes up 1 hierarchy. And if we delete that, it goes up another. Delete that, goes up another. or we can drag. It just comes out. And a lot of this is just, again, fiddling around, trying stuff, and the fact that you can undo so many things is very helpful. Because I can undo. I just brought all these back. And then to redo their deletion, again, not Control Y, but Control Shift Z, boom, boom, bam. All back and forth. So there's very little that you can do in Blender that you can't reverse the effects of, that you can't undo. So, this icon here, selectable. I disable that, I can no longer select the cube. I can select the camera, I just can't select the cube anymore. So if you're done modeling something, and you don't want to accidentally click it and mess it up, disable selection, so you can still see it, but you just can't mess with it anymore. Clicking as much as I can, it does not working. Or you can hide it. You can also hide with H, but I don't like that because it's not as deliberate. Click it, press H. Click up here again, press H again. Shift H, no, Control H, nope. See, it's tricky. So I'm just gonna undo it here. This is good for quick little, oh, I don't want to see this. But this TV screen here is disable in viewport. Essentially, it's similar to hiding it, but it's more, not more permanent, but it's more resistant to accidentally unhiding it. It's more universal. I don't know, I just like having both up there. In very, very nuanced situations, will you need to make the distinction between hide in viewport and disable in viewport. Because this is meant to be temporary, and the hide is meant to be temporary, the disable is meant to be more fixed. And so I actually have an animation that uses both of these in the works. So you won't be able to see it. You might see it. I might show the animation side of it after the animation gets released. But yes, I am animating something later. Shh. And then finally, you have a little picture of the camera. Disable in renders, which means if we go back to our camera view and we look at it, you'd be able to see this cube. Unless, hold on, let's rotate you like that. Just to get some thing, let's put a light in there, light like that. So this is what you would see if you had rendered it. If you disable here, the cube would not render. It would disappear. Now, why would you put anything into a scene that you don't want to show up in the final picture or the final image or final animation? There are very few cases. I won't say very few cases. There are a couple cases. If you want to make a reference point, or if you there are a bunch of cases. I do them all the time. Again, I wish we had more time to do this, but probably not in just a still scene or a still animation like this will we disable anything in renders. So I'm going to delete you. I'm going to put you back to 0, 0, 0. So this looks pretty good for me. I'm going to get rid of the cube. We got our scene selected up. I'm going to drag this back up. And now we go through our settings. So I'm actually going to click the camera as we go through them. And then I just go through one by one all the settings. Now here's something common to Blender. I don't need to, let's say all these were open, some were open, let's just open some random ones. And let's say I want to close them all. I can click, 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 or, you know how Blender likes to click and drag, click and hold down the mouse and just drag it down. And it minimizes everything. And then if I want to undo, I click and drag it up. Opens everything. Same thing here. I want to disable this, drag, or enable this, drag. Click, 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 or drag. There's so many user-friendly little tricks that Blender has that I just love them all. So, render engine. You have Eevee, Workbench, or Cycles. Eevee is not the Pokemon. It's internal to Blender. It's kind of the new one. It's good for if you want to render just a little quick and dirty kind of image for no real special stuff. But if you want more advanced things to show up, like special lighting effects, or special materials, or special textures, or special little After Effects, Eevee may not be able to do it very well. Cycles is traditionally the one you want, because Cycles gives you the option of using a GPU if you have one. You can use a CPU, but that's what a GPU is for. Graphics processing unit, for processing graphics. So that's what I choose. And then I just close everything, and then I just reopen everything. That's just a habit I have. And I just go through all the settings, and then just see which ones I need to change for my scene. So, grease pencil, I don't use, I skip that. Sampling. Now what does sampling do? Sampling render, sampling viewport. So in Eevee, it's different. Let's add our cube. Let's add a light. Oops. Add a light. Move you up here. Let's see in rendered view. Let's have both of these move up a bit. So you notice how it's kind of just like plasticky. If we change to cycles, you see this little thing that popped up, rendering done. Change back to Eevee, you don't have that. Because Eevee is like a snapshot of a render. Cycles goes through cycles of rendering over and over. It's iterative until it gets to the final product. This is the viewport, which means it rendered 32 cycles. If we were to release this as a final product, it would render 128 times, because it wants the final product to look great, and it's okay if the viewport doesn't look as great as the final product. But based on some other tricks that we're going to do later on, I don't need this to be an insane, not insane, like a high number. I can move this down to 50. And I can actually bump this up to 50. So I'm pretty much getting, in my viewport, what I will get in the final product. So I know kind of exactly what's going to happen. And then there's this thing called adaptive sampling. Now if you hover over it, it'll tell you a little description about what it does. So here, number of samples to render for each pixel. And here, number of samples to render in the viewport, not the final image. So here, adaptive sampling. So what adaptive sampling basically does, to my understanding, is it renders a pixel once, and it renders that same pixel a second time, and it renders that same pixel a third time, until it gets to 50 times. So every pixel in the viewport, in your camera view, I'll move it down a bit, like that. I'll move you down a bit. Actually, I'll shift you like that, I'll move you like that. Yeah. So and you can see up here, it's out of 50 every time I move it around. It's out of 50, because every time I shift the scene, it had to restart. It has to restart every time I move around. So if I change this to 100, this should still be 50, because that's not the viewport. But if I change this one to 100, well, now it's out of 100. So the more samples you have, the finer resolution, the less grainy of an image you'll have. So usually like several hundred gives you a high quality image. But I'm going to show you a workaround later where you can get by with low samples and still have a very clean, noiseless image. Now, adaptive sampling means for any pixel, Blender doesn't predict that that pixel will have a lot of noise to it. It'll actually do less than what we predict. And I trust Blender's algorithm to determine which pixels are likely to be noisy, in which case it'll render the full 50 cycles, and which pixels are probably not going to be that noisy, in which case it may only do 20 pixels, or 20 cycles, or 24 cycles, or 32 cycles. It'll save work for itself. And the more work you save, the less time it'll take to render the final image. And saving time on rendering the final image while still having a good quality image is kind of the goal of any Blender model or Blender artist. Having a high quality rendered image in the least amount of time it takes to render. Because there's a lot of pixels in here. Each one rendered 50 times. If we can save on some of those cycles, by all means, save it. Save processing time, save actual time. Noise threshold and min samples. 0 just means automatic. Blender decides. And 0 just means, again, automatic. So I trust Blender's internal algorithms to leave these as automatic. I don't need advanced light paths. Remember how I said, if you look over here, it says path tracing sample? That's because the way Blender works, it traces the path of a light and how light bounces off of objects in real life. It tries to replicate that with how many times light particles bounce around. And it can bounce like 100 times. And that's how many times a pixel gets changed by passing light bounce. It gets real complicated on a pixel by pixel level. So what I do, it does sacrifice the light and shadow effects a bit, but not really enough for me to complain. I go direct light. All these numbers went down now. I could do full global. That's 128 scatter, 128 bounces, 128 bounces. It means every light particle bounces off an object 128 times. That's a lot of things for Blender to calculate the effects of. Rather, I just do direct light, and say, you know what? You can bounce around a bit less, save yourself some trouble, and my image will still be pretty good despite that. So I'll save you the work. And I don't need clamping, mostly because I don't really know what that is. Don't need claw sticks, don't need volumes, don't need hair, don't need simplify, don't need viewport render, don't need simplify, don't need motion blur. Motion blur is if you want to blur your motion. It made it look weird last time I used it, so I don't use it. Film. I only really would use film for this checkbox here, transparent. You see what's happening in the background? It's this grid. Maybe you're familiar with that. If you ever do a Google image search and you look for vector art of a character from a game or something, and sometimes it shows up with a completely white or completely black background, and sometimes it shows up with this grid-like background. The difference is, if I rendered this image as is, it would be a gray cube with a little light on a gray background. So if I put it over another picture, the background would obscure it. Transparent, it's a transparent background. I could put this picture over another picture and it would show through the background. It's very useful if you want to layer images that come from separate image files. You can make 5 different cubes, each with a transparent background, and you can assemble them in any way, and the actual background of the camera frame will not interfere. Since we're making a full background as a single image, I don't need it to be transparent, so I don't need that one, so I'm going to ignore that. So you see how many things we kind of just ignored. A lot of settings, most of them I'm not familiar with. I just use the ones I know. Performance. This one you're really just going to have to take my word on. Tiles. I'll explain what those tiles are in a second. I want them to be 512 by 512. And that's the only change I'm going to make here. And I'll explain what those are later. That's it for performance. Bake, I don't need. Freestyle, I don't need. Color management, I don't need to change. And performance, I changed the tile size. I don't ever really need to go back and change it again, so I'm going to hide it. Light paths, I'm probably not going to change again. Sampling, I'm probably not going to change again. So I don't really need to come back. I don't need to come back to this menu, really, at all. So I'm done with this one. This one I don't really do either. So I don't need this one, I'm done with this one. This one is probably one of your most important ones. The one you go to a lot. This one is important to set up. This one you might have to keep coming back to. This is your resolution. Now we could start your resolution with just 1920 by 1080. What I like to do by default is I just double it. And I double them both equally. So now there's twice as many pixels fit inside this little window as there were before. Just helps with the resolution and making the final image just a bit better, a bit stronger. Now I like to keep this up in case I need to do a higher resolution later. But again, our little trick, minimize it all and then maximize it all so we see everything. So we're done with that. We don't need stereoscopy, scopy, I don't know what it is. Output. This is where your files get saved. I'm not going to open it, I'm not going to click it, because I don't need to show you guys the internal mechanisms of my laptop. But this is where you would click and you would just pick a folder, pick a location, and that's where your final images and your final frames would be saved. Not where your project would be saved, but where your final things would be saved. They're different. Let's say you're animating a scene, and let's say you animate 10 frames of a scene. Now you need to render each individual frame by itself. Let's say you render up to frame 7, where you realize, oh wait, I made a mistake. Let me make a change and re-render these 10 frames. If you have overwrite checked, it won't care that you rendered the first 7 already. It'll redo them anyway. This can work for you if you're doing a lot of trial and error. It works against you if you're kind of in the last stages. And let's say you want to render an animation that's 3,000 frames long, and you get to rendering frame 2,000, and you have to quit for the day. And then the next day, you want to continue where you left off. Well, if you forget to check overwrite, it'll just start from 1, and it'll re-render those first 2,000. And if you're not aware, you're just wasting all that time re-rendering images that you already rendered completely. completely needlessly. If you keep overwrite clicked, it'll start at frame 2001 and then move on until it hits 3000. So overwrite, you click or unclick depending on your usage. So that definitely you need to come back to. Placeholders, if you're rendering an image, it'll start rendering it in Blender, and then it'll find the location that you have here, and then it'll place the finished rendered image in there. If you click placeholders, it does that kind of in a reversed order. It finds this location, puts a placeholder to make sure, the file location is correct, there's enough room for it, and then once it secures its place, once it, it has its reservations in that folder, then it renders, and then it places it where it marked its territory. So that to me just sounds like a smart idea, so I always turn those on. File extensions, cache result, I don't mess with those. And then file format. You do PNG. For still images, I like doing JPEG. JPEG takes up less space, so you can fit a lot more and have a lot less memory used up. And then you have all these. I don't really mess with these. I don't mess with metadata. I don't mess with post-processing. So output, I would come back to change this. I would come back to change these. And now you know why. View layer, again, minimize it all and maximize it all. View layer, I don't use. Passes, this is important. This is what information gets passed between different parts of Blender. Kind of controls how different parts of the Blender software communicate with each other. The only thing you need to do, and you only need to do it once, is here, denoising data. And we'll touch on why in a second. So check that, and then I'm done with passes. I don't need filter, I don't need override. This is where it says denoising, where we pass denoising data. This is not the same denoising. This is the old version of Blender denoising. There's a new version that we actually use that uses this denoising data. This checkbox passes denoising data to the new version of denoising. That's what pass means. So once you check that, you're done. You never need to come back to this pet tab again. Camera, Units, you can do metric, you can use imperial for inches, feet, pounds, and seconds, or you can do degrees, meters, kilograms. I grew up around inches, feet, miles, pounds, but I'm also raised as an engineer in school, where we used meters, kilograms, newtons, centimeters. So for design's sake, I stick with metric, which is the default, so I don't need to change anything there. Gravity, if you want to mess around with gravity, feel free. Here's right here. You can make it stronger, make it weaker, or whatever. I don't want to mess with gravity. Keying sets, you don't need to mess with. Audio, you control audio separately. If you want to add audio here, or you want to add it in like some video making software like like a Premiere Pro, Adobe Premiere, you can do it there. You don't have to do it here. I don't need this, I don't need this. I don't need to come back to this tab anymore. Then here is your world. I don't need the preview. You notice how it's all gray in the background. That's where you control this. You can move it up. Oh, I'm still in rendered mode. But you're only really going to see it in rendered mode. So there's a difference here between brightening up the whole world and just adding a sun. Hold on, I added a point. Get rid of the point. Add a sun. The sun is in a direction. It casts a shadow on this top square. Delete that, and then increase the world. If you look just at this top square, it's kinda just as bright as if you added a sun. But it is different. So it depends. If you want everything to just be equally brightened up, you can just brighten up the world, and you can make it tinted whatever color you want. Whatever brightness you want. Or you can make it dark black and only have light. Only have your point control. Only have the light, like you're shining a flashlight. This is good for doing like dark themes, or if you want to do a piece of like artwork where someone's like in the dark in a basement shining a flashlight. You just want to illuminate a couple things. You probably want to make the world pitch black. It's really good for different visual storytelling. But I'm going to bring the world up just a bit more. I'm going to like that. Moderate gray. And this is something you can change later. Volume I don't do. Ambient occlusion. This is kind of like looking at two different objects in different distances from each other. It's good for a special effect, but for this background purpose, I don't do it. Raisability, I don't do that. I don't need any of those. I don't need that. I don't need that. So I'm just going to keep this world open right here. And most of these other ones, I don't really need. I don't need. I don't need. I don't need. I don't need. Here's the physics, constraints, those are important. Now we had, you see a little light bulb. That's because we selected the light. If we click out, watch this light bulb down here. Click something else. No longer light bulb. Well, now I'm going to click the camera. I have a camera here. Now, camera. Remember how we talked about your different views of, let's go back to this, views of perspective and orthographic versus perspective? You can control your camera to make your camera perspective or orthographic. Perspective, orthographic. So this is how, if you wanted to do like a drawing, if you wanted to render a 2D image in 3D, in a 3D software, as if it was made on a flat piece of paper, you would simply just look at it with an orthographic camera, rather than a perspective camera. So for instance, if I wanted to make you all zeros in the camera, I want to move you like this, let's say shrink you down this and move you down like this and move you down like that and up like that and up like that and that. So this would be our camera perspective view. Change to orthographic. Just get flat squares. You don't see the side here or the sides there. Let's change the world and let's change the world a little bit brighter so you can tell. A little too bright. Like that. Yeah. Go to the camera. Perspective, and then back to orthographic. Just squares. Perspective, C3D. So that's how you can manipulate it with the camera. Not just with your own viewport, but with the actual final rendered version. So we were here, camera. This will be a background image. But I think personally, perspective view looks a bit more real. So I'm going to keep it in perspective. And then you could change the focal length of the camera. You can change the sensor size of the camera. The manipulating sensor size and focal length allow you to zoom in, zoom out, and focus in or focus away. But I tend not to mess with those. I'll just move the camera closer if I want to change this. I don't want to mess, because I don't know, I'm not a photographer. I don't know enough about like camera lenses and sizes and all that stuff. Also, it is 2 hours of the stream, but I don't feel like stopping yet, so I'm going to keep going a bit more. So yeah, so in case, I'm not going to change it, but if you want to do panoramic, you can do a fisheye, so like that. You can do a fisheye equidistant, you can do fisheye equisolid, you could do mirror ball, you could do equirectangular. Hold on. Whatever you want to do. Just have fun, just experiment. So I don't need this, I don't need the camera, I don't need safe area. Safe area is, I don't need background images. Background image, if you want to add an image just in the background, in the background of your view, it'll let you. You can do it as like a reference. If you're trying to model like a coffee cup, you can find a picture of a coffee cup, and then so every time, you won't really see it here, but every time you look through the camera, you'll see a background image of a coffee cup to use as a reference to see if you got it right. It's pretty simple to do, but I don't need it, because I'm not modeling this after anything. I'm just coming up with them from scratch. Past part 2, what happens when I just click it? It looks the same shade of gray, it's not darker. So this just helps remind me, hey, I'm outside of the camera view. Now I'm back in, because it's darker and now it's clear again. I don't want to use depth of field. I don't use custom properties. So that's basically it. That's basically all the setup that I do. Just go through all the settings, and now I've set it up almost exactly as I wanted to. My only thing, and this is not OCD, I can work around it without it, but it's just a habit. I like moving this back, and I'm watching these guys, moving it back just so it starts going to a second layer. Boom, second layer. That's usually good enough for me. So now this setup is a very familiar, very comfortable setup. I'm going to give myself some room here. Familiar, very comfortable setup for just beginning to work in Blender. Whew. Who knew I'd spend an entire stream just setting up and showing you how to work Blender? And we didn't even get to the main part, the actual modeling yet. So I think I'm going to stream for maybe, let me see, how do I, yeah, I can stream for maybe another hour, yeah, another hour, one more hour. But after that, I really need to go eat, and then I have time scheduled to work on finishing my animation, so I gotta go do that. So yeah, so I'll just stream another hour. Hope you don't mind. So we're done setting up. So now we can start actually building our scene. You have stage, lighting, and props. So we're gonna start with the stage. So I'm just gonna try to go within my head an idea of what I want this to look like. Now I want this to be like a game show. like a game show stage. So I want there to be a stage. I want there to be a backdrop. I want there to be like an overhang on the top, maybe with words on it. I want there to be flashing lights, maybe flashing in a circle. But not a seizure warning or anything. I want there to be bright, vibrant, diverse colors, very strong. I want there to be something moving in the background, something going back and forth, something spinning in a circle. I want it to be like a half circus, half like Las Vegas, half all this crazy stuff. Because the music is going to be pretty fast, happy, and upbeat to go with it. So I want the background to match. We already have the slow-moving stars and the sun, the moon, with all this chill, peaceful feeling. Now I want something exciting. So I go to my main view, and I'm going to build a stage. How do you build a stage? Let's start with a cube, and we'll just manipulate a cube. So here's our camera view. So here's what we're actually going to see. So I'm actually going to shrink you, move you down, move you side to side. Maybe you should move you down, like shrink it down. Hold on, shrink. Then I'll shrink Z like that. This will be, how's it going to look? It's going to be the stage and then going to have a drop. So this actually looks pretty good. Now, do I want the stage to go all the way to the ground? Do I want to show you're kind of in a room and the stage is just in the back? Now, let's say that you're on the stage. So I'm going to actually bring it down, bring you down a bit, and then make you bigger. So yeah, so you can see the sides, but you can't see the bottom. That's pretty much it. So now I'm going to go here, and I'm going to actually do something, which is the other thing, the thing you use most often. Probably, you use the grab, the scale, and the rotate probably the most often. This is what I'm going to show you is what you use just after that in terms of frequency. And that is when you press tab. Actually, hold on. Before I do that, we just hit another hour. I'm going to take another water refill and break, and then we'll come back afterwards. I'm going to make sure we pace ourselves. So, be back soon. I don't know about you, but I am getting really hungry. I think I'm gonna go for some hot wings and a hot dog. There's a local place that makes an unbelievably good hot dog. Like, it sounds silly, but I kid you not, it is one of the best hot dogs I've ever had my whole life. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is about that place, about that hot dog, what they do to it, what they put on it, but it is like the most flavorful with all the toppings, and I'm like, the bread is toasted just right, and gosh, I'm definitely going there today. I need to get a hot dog. I need to get it. And their hot wings, they're not the greatest in the world, but they do complement it. Or maybe I'll get a pizza. I don't know. I'm probably going to get that hot dog and wings. All right, so where were we? We were right here. Okay, so we're building our stage. Okay, so here's the thing. I'm going to actually get this cursor out of the way because I don't need it. So how do you do that? Shift right click. Shift right click. Just get the cursor wherever you want to go. So now I have my base, the base of my stage fit. So you see up here it's cube. So I'm actually going to F2, rename it to base, and now I'm going to press M to move it to stage. And boom. Boom. There it is. Okay. So you see, the orange selected base, it's kind of below, it doesn't really matter. This 0 level doesn't really matter, it doesn't show up. And there's a little orange dot in the middle. This is where that orange dot comes into play. If you have an object selected and you press Tab. Actually, before we do that, I'm going to go to wireframe mode. So you see it now. And now if you press Tab, the whole thing's selected, you click out. You can select, this is called edit mode, because you can edit whatever you selected when you press Tab. You select different, this is called vertices. And again, just like with the point light, you can't really rotate it, you can't scale it, but you can move it, grab it. And you can manipulate the actual shape like that. If you select more than one with Shift or Control, either one works, and now you can grab it, now you can rotate it, now you can scale it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm happy with how far I'm going to actually move this up a bit. Right around there. Right about there. Right around there. Yeah. So what I'm looking at this, and I want this stage, at the base of the stage, to extend further down and extend further back. But I don't want it to extend further forward or further up. So if I just scale it like that, yeah, I'm getting it further back, but I'm also getting it further up. And I just positioned it where I don't want to move this last bit anymore. Same thing if I try to scale it down, I also scale it up at the same time. So here is where I can edit it, and while I'm editing it, I can take advantage of that opportunity and change other things if I wanted to. So, going to click Tab. All I did was Z into wireframe mode again. Tab. And now, you could sort of see through it, right? You could see through the box. And that's what this little button up here, toggle X-ray. In wireframe mode, X-ray is on by default. In every other mode, it's off. You see it's faded out. But if you could toggle it either way. So this is solid mode. You can't see through it. But if I toggled it on, very faintly, but you kind of can see through it a little bit. Same thing for wireframe mode, you can toggle it off, and now you can't see through it anymore. Why does this make a difference? If you want to select all, let's say, these 4 vertices right there, wireframe see-through is on. Turn see-through off, select those. That one didn't get selected because you couldn't see it. So now you select it, turn it on. So that's how see-through allows it to work. For visual inspection, just looking at it, you can turn see-through off, but for actually selecting the right vertices or edges or faces that you need, wireframe with X-ray on is always a good idea. Excuse me. So, you still see your orange dot right here. That's your origin. Now, watch what happens when I scale. It doesn't move. It still stays equidistant. Yes, that is a word. Equidistant from both edges. It's right in the middle. If I edit, and see I'm face down. So I selected just these 2. But actually, I selected all 4 of them because I was in see-through mode. I think if you don't, yeah, it doesn't select the bottom 2. You see, these are selected, these are not. So see-through on, top view, select them all. And now I want to move this back. I can move it anywhere like this, but I'm going to middle click just along the y-axis. And notice that the origin doesn't move to stay equidistant anymore. So technically speaking, if you were to rotate this, it would rotate around the middle. Right? If you rotate around the middle. But if you move it like this, it still rotates around the origin, but not the geometric middle of the stage. So edit doesn't manipulate the origin of your objects. So if you need to put it in the geometric center, just right click, set origin. And you have a bunch of different options. If you want an origin to geometry, so that means I'm moving the origin to the geometric center of this newly tweaked, newly changed object. So I'm going to do that, but I'm going to do that after I'm done with all my little edits and manipulations. So, go back to camera view. That still doesn't seem as far back as I'd like. Maybe a little more, but not too much more. So, I'm going to edit, back to wireframe. So just like I don't have to do wireframe, I just like it. Move it back a bit more, not too much. And then I want to take the bottom and move it down. Now I can actually go to camera view and move it down, middle click, middle down, Z, until it just goes below the frame, the end limit of the actual camera view. Doesn't matter how much more, how much less it goes beyond, the camera's not going to see it. So this is definitely as tall as I want it to be, and I think it is as far back as I want it to be. Now, I'm just looking at this, I got an idea, because that's what a lot of design is. You look at something and then in the moment, you come up with a new idea. I want this, a little piece, a little rectangle on here to kind of come jutting out. Because then we could put like designs or letters on it. And that's a good way to showcase another little trick. So I'm going to zoom in, wireframe, edit mode. Yeah. So here's a little trick. Select all the vertices on a face. Now we're going to make an inset. I think that's what it's called. But if you click the letter I, now this is one of the more obscure tricks that you may not use nearly as often, but once you know how, you end up using a lot more than you think. So I'm going to click Inset, and what that's going to do, watch. I clicked it. Now I'm going to move my cursor. It created kind of a copy of it. Now that isn't exactly the shape I want it to be, so I'm going to actually look head on at it. And then I'm going to move. Now that I have all 4 of these vertices selected, I can do G, move it up a bit. I want it like there. I'm going to do this camera view. And then I'm going to scale and middle click to do sideways. Kind of like that. And then adjust G down a bit. Maybe a little higher. And again, I'm just going to scale sideways. And because we're getting to the end of the stage, I'm going to hold down Shift so we can do more fine adjustments rather than just big adjustments, fine adjustments. So kind of around there. That looks good. And again, all the talk about like bringing up this and doing all the numbers and doing all the stuff, that's for if you really need it to be precise. But for this, I don't really need it to be that precise. And now I think that's a bit maybe too thick. Maybe too thick. So I'm going to actually take this vertex and this vertex. I'm going to move them up. I just press G, X, G, the Z direction, and holding down Shift to move it slightly. And I'm going to do right around, come on, right around that. Yeah, right about there. That looks good. A lot of this is just eyeballing it. So if you have a creative eye, you're going to have a lot of fun with this. Now, I've made the vertex, the little stamp, but it doesn't jut out yet. So here's what I'm going to do. Not the number pad, but the number keys above your letters on your keyboard. If you're in edit mode, if you click 1, you can manipulate the vertices of your object. If you click 2, you can manipulate the edges of your object. And if you click 3, you can manipulate the faces of your object. So 3 is faces, 2 is edges, 1 is the vertices. So I want to extrude, which means bring out, this little panel right here. So I could select all 4 of these vertices and then extrude it out, or I could just go to shortcut, click the number 3 to see the faces, click the face, and boom, there it is. And then I could just extrude it out. I was going to show you, yeah, I'll just do that. So to extrude, you click E for extrude. And watch. Click E, boom. And now I'm moving. That's extruding. So I don't need to extrude it too much. I just need to extrude it. See, this is the example where perspective view kind of works against you. So I'm going to move back to orthographic and just get real close. Or I could just do flat. And I'm just going to move right around there. Now, let's see how that looks. So you can kind of see it. Sort of. Nah, that's a lot easier to see. So this is our final rendered view for it. A lot easier to see the little bump out. So if we etched some letters or some fancy design on that, that'll look really cool. But do we think it's extruded too far? Nah, it's not. It's not. It's good. It's good. Okay, so wireframe. I think that is it for the basic structure of our stage. I do want to put like some pillars or something, some like little fancy thing that comes up here. I just want to fill this empty space with something. So I think we'll do that next. That'll be probably a prop. Now let's make it part of the stage. One thing I did notice, I'm going to do camera. Lens. Okay, now look at the... I think it was something like this. Well, there was something that I saw that I wanted to undo. Oh no, that's not. Never mind, it's not the camera. It's not the camera's fault. Forget I said anything. Okay, so that's that. So now I want to add those little things on the top. Do I want to add anything? Do I want to change the structure of the stage? You know what? No, let's do something different. Let's add a material to it. So this little kind of half globe, half stuff that looks like it has a danger sign, that's your materials. So I have the stage selected. If I didn't select it, there's no material item. But if I select the stage, it's on material. Now, we're about to do something different. We're going to go to a different scene entirely. Not different scene, different workspace. Right now we've just been working up here. You see, it says layout. But there's a whole bunch of other tabs up here that we're going to use. There are like 2, 3, or 4 of them. Not all of them. Right now we're in layout. Now I'm going to add a material. Just click new. And all these options just pop up. At this point, we don't really have to touch anything else other than naming it. So I'm going to name it, what am I going to name? I'll call it Stage Top. Yeah, I'll call it Stage Top. I'll drive this down for later. Now, we're going to go to a different tab. We're in Layout, but now since we're working with colors and materials, we're going to go to the Shading tab. Now, each of these has like its own setup, its own pre-opened windows, because Blender is trying to predict what it thinks you're going to use. It's usually pretty good, but I always make my little tweaks. So what I'm going to do, it opens up here, in case you want to add any files, and here, in case you want to do some other fancy stuff. I don't need those. I work with simple stuff. So I'm going to right click, join areas, get rid of it. Oh, that didn't work, hold on. Gotta be side to side. Click, join areas, there we go. And now click join areas. You can click join either direction you want, as long as they're the same height or the same width. So I can't have like this join with this, because this length and this length are not the same. But here I can do either way. I'm going to get rid of this. Boom. And now I'm actually going to bring you up a bit so we can scroll in and see all this stuff. So all on the layout tab, all these options here are all the same ones that you see in this little box right here. And this is our material view. This is our stage. So we're in material preview. Very important that you're in the material preview because you're dealing with materials. Otherwise, you won't see any effect whatsoever. So now, and you can manipulate these with G for grab. You can grab them, just grab them around. So what color do I want to make the top of the stage? we can make it like a solid color, or a solid, or like a dark gray, or maybe, I don't know, something usual, normal. But I just remembered there's a pattern in Blender for like a wood panel floor. So I'm thinking, and now I'm thinking again, a wood panel floor probably doesn't fit the vibe of a game show. Maybe like a house, but not a game show. So I think I want to make it like a strong textured color. So let's make the floor, actually let's rename this one. Stage top. I'm not going to work on the top, I'm going to work at the side. So I'm going to do stage body. So now as we'll work on the whole stage. So let's make it, what color do we want? What color do we want? Let's make it dark, bright. We can make it more of a color, more of a center. You notice that this corresponds with that, this corresponds with that, and over here, this corresponds with around like that. That's hue, saturation, value. Or we can do red, green, blue. Red, green, blue. No red, all the green. No green, all the blue. Blue the green. We can do, our aquamarine. My signature color. Color of my voice lines. That's what they're called, the little voice lines, the one that light up whenever I speak. You can do that. But that looks horrible as a stage. So I'm gonna do a different one. I don't want it to be that bright. And if we do a red and we darken it, it'll look brown. We could also make it more purpley, maybe like a bluish stage. Yeah, like a dark blue, not too dark, like that. Does that look good as a stage? I think that looks good. We can always change the colors later. These colors are so easy to change at a later time. So we have the color of the basic body. Now, I'm going to show you we can make a different color for different parts of the object. And that's where, when we talked about wireframe mode, going to edit and going to like vertex or edge or face, this is where that comes in handy. You assign different colors. You can assign different colors to specific faces of an object. So I can make this face alone a different color than the rest of the body. In fact, that's exactly what I'm going to do. This face and all the faces of this entire jutting out portion. I'm going to make all that a different color. So, what I'm going to do is actually go back to Layout, and I'm going to press plus. This box right here shows all of the colors that are contained within the entire object. Right now there's just one. I'm going to add another one. It adds a placeholder, a blank space. And I'm going to add, well, I never use the default material. I'm just going to change this to stage front. There we go. Now if we go back to our shading, and we can probably drag this. No, we can't drag it. Oh no, we can't move it. Oh well. So back to material. Stage front. I never assigned it yet. Sorry, I missed a step. So you're in here, you're looking at it. You go to edit mode, and I already have the front part selected. So you have their faces selected, you select a material you want it to be, and you click assign. Boom. So now I have assigned just what I selected as the stage front color. Everything else is the default body. So if we go back here, we should see that. And lo and behold, we see it. Get out of edit mode, go back to our rendered mode, and that's kind of what it looks like. Go to our material preview. Now we can change this to be whatever you want. I'm thinking like a nice... Oh, this is looking like some twisted weird of a version of a GameCube. Let's see, let's make it... I don't want to make it gray. I want to make it, let's say... Purple and green is usually an interesting color. Purple, yellow, purple, one. And I'm just trying to guess what looks good as like a backdrop. Maybe like a light green, or like a yellow green. Yellow green, maybe. And feel free to disagree with my color choice. But I'm thinking maybe this, like this yellow tan. That looks pretty good. That looks pretty good. And we could have like etched marks. Yeah, we could have like black or pink or something lettering on top. Yeah, that looks pretty decent. Okay, now I want a different color for the actual surface. So I'm going to add another color. Call this... So we have stage body, stage front. I'm going to add a new color called stage top. And this is why I didn't want to start with this one, because this I hadn't decided what I wanted yet. This one I'm going to show a couple little tricks. Stage top, I'm going to edit wireframe so I can see everything. I have just the top selected as the top face selected. So now I click assign. No, click top. Make sure you click the right material first and then assign. And that way, edit mode, shading, it's assigned. So actually, that looks a bit too... I don't think I want that going all the way to the edge. So I'm actually going to edit this, go back to press 1, go to our vertices. Actually, no. Actually, yeah. And just going to highlight the top bit. Now you notice I just clicked, left click, and dragged, and I selected what I needed to select, and I got all of them. There's another way to do that. Several other ways. Of course there's other ways. You can click B, or you can click C. B as in banana, C as in coconut. If you click C, look at the cursor. Look at my cursor when I click C. A little circle appears. So now, if I scroll, the size of the circle changes. And if I hold down left click, I can select just vertices as the cursor passes over them. And if I middle click, I deselect them as the cursor passes over them. And if I right click, again, right click to escape, right click to cancel. If I click B, you see this grid, I can drag. Or B, deselect. Now you can't do that regular. Now drag and just left click drag and the whole letter B left click drag are the same thing. It's just letter B you can't, regular you can't right click to deselect particular vertices. It brings up the menu. If you do B and right click, hold on, no, not B, right click. Middle click, sorry, middle click. Middle click just pans around. But B, middle click, allows you to deselect at a time. I don't really use B that often. I use C, because C allows you to select and then deselect at will. So what I'm going to do is I don't need to do that, but I'm just going to go to this, and I'm going to go C, select U, and then cancel out, select that, and that should select all of them. So, what I'm going to do is what I did last time with this extruded part. I'm going to press I for inset, and I just want to make a little border around the edge of the purple color, And the inside square is going to be the new color. So I'm going to click I, boom, and now hold down Shift, because I don't want it to be a big inset. Hold down Shift, and slowly move my cursor in to right around there. Now I want to look at a good view for this. So I can see that's already mostly spaced on the side to side, not so much on the up and down. So I can actually scale along the Y axis, hold down Shift, and I'm just going to move you down like around there. And I don't need to extrude that, I just needed to make it a different face. So if I go to face mode, which is 3, this is stage top. But what is this? That's also stage top. So I want that to be back to stage body. Same with this one. Goes back to assign stage body. And this one, assign stage body. And this one, assign stage body. I could have selected them all. And then just click stage body assign. It would have assigned them all at once. That's also workable. So now, if I go to shading, look at that. You get the little border inside. Now I don't want it to be white, because that looks strange. And I want it to be... yeah, okay. So I want it to be, and we might have to change the position of the stage later, but it looks good as a stage overall. I want this to be a little trick. So, just as in layout, you can do Shift A, you can add meshes or lights or cameras, curves, all this stuff. In shading, in this area, Shift A to add special effects. So I'm actually going to add a texture. And I'm thinking I'm going to add checker texture. Now, since I'm determining the colors, I can make one color like a hold on, let me zoom in a bit. Get rid of blue, get rid of green. I want to make it red, and I want the other color to be pure white. So red and white. So now I can actually break this connection. Never mind. I am in stage body. I'm in the wrong one. So get rid of this. That was just X. It didn't ask you for confirmation. I'm going to actually go and drop down to stage top. Nope, that's not what I'm going to do. I'm going to go over to layout, click stage top, and then... there we go. Okay. Because if I edit, now I'm selected the stage top. There we go. There we go. It helps to be meticulous. Helps to be deliberate with what you click and when you click it. Otherwise, you can make a change to the wrong thing quite easily. So you have this, and then I'm going to add, give me some room, I'm going to add the checker. I'm going to break, I'm going to actually get out of edit mode, go to material, break this. It goes black because there's no material feeding the actual color. I'm going to make this pure white. Make this pure red. I'm going to connect the color to the surface. And there's checker. Now I can change the size. Again, I'm going to hold down left click, and I'm going to drag. Drag up, drag down. Drag up. So I think I'm going to drag around here, and then I'm going to hold shift and drag slowly until I get kind of like that. Now I don't really like the red and white because that makes it look like, honestly, Five Nights at Freddy's kitchen or an old-fashioned apron. So maybe instead of red, they make it purple. Nah. Make it blue. That looks pretty the whole thing is kind of blue. I want to add some different color. Maybe pink. Like a nice pink. Nice light pink right there. Now, I noticed something that you may have noticed. This is looking at the stage very flat-like. So I'm actually going to do a little trick, and I'm going to set origin to geometry, and I'm going to rotate it very slightly. So now we can see more of the stage. And if I want, I'll rotate. I'll click X and I'll hold Shift. Rotate a little more. Not too much that it's obvious, but right around there. Now we do layout, camera view, material property. That looks fairly decent. Okay. Now you notice the texture is very bright. So that's actually what happens when the checker texture is by itself. These colors have a sort of glow to them. So now that we know our colors, I'm actually going to input RGB, and I'm going to copy the hex. The hex is just like a numerical, alphanumerical, so letters and numbers, alphanumerical code for what color you happen to choose. I'm going to copy that, so just Control-C, click out, and this one I'm going to paste. So this one feeds into, so I want to wonder if we go to this, right now it's glowing white and glowing pink. So if we do this, it should take away the glowing of the white. That's hard to tell. And then I'm going to duplicate you, because you can duplicate a lot of stuff. Take you, take your hex. Duplicate is just Shift D, remember? Paste the hex there. Do that. What if I do this instead? Now I don't really know what's happening, but what's going to happen? So I'm just experimenting. We break that, and we do this instead. Or we do. So hold on. So here's what I'm trying to do. If we go to the world and we bring the world darkness down to 0, for some reason this texture still lights up. So we do factor instead. No, color. So I don't know why the texture is making it glow. But I think there's a fancy way of mixing it. Texture goes into factor into, let's actually do something different. Let's try something. I'll select this and this and this. Now I'm going to do Shift. Move you over here. Break that. Drag this over there. And this color is going to go into you. I wonder if that worked. The world is all dark. What if we bring it up? And look at that. It's no longer glowing. I learned something new today. So if the texture by itself directly into the material output will cause it to glow. But if you feed it through the base color, yellow to yellow, yellow dot to yellow dot, and then green dot to green dot, if you do it through this menu, which is already here, it takes away the glow and it makes it act like all the other colors. Huh. And then that there, and that there. So I hope it's kind of clear what I did. And you can just manipulate, you can just added a shade texture. There's checker, there's brick, there's gradient, there's image, there's magic, there's noise, there's all this other stuff. Just explore. There's shaders, there's emission, which is a glow. Emission is a glow. There's glossy, which is like making it look all clean and glossy. There's all these other different things you can just play with to make it look whatever you want to look like. So yeah, so let's go back to our layout and let's look at, that looks pretty good. So now I want to test how it looks, and this is the last thing I'm going to do before we cut it quits for today. Let's see how it looks with a spotlight on it. So I'm going to add a spotlight. Now that starts pretty big, so I'm going to move it up, move it out, move it over. And we're still in our rendered view. That's why it looks all grainy. It's constantly reevaluating those 50 samples over and over. So I'm going to move you like this. Now here I want to get it dead center. So I'm going to do X direction 0, boom. And now that's an example where I did want it to be precise. So now I can actually take the light symbol and no custom properties, spot shape. I might do that. Use nodes, light, preview. I don't need preview. Okay, so whenever you see something with use nodes, you might see that with colors, materials, textures, lighting, or even something called compositing. Nodes allow you more options than just using what is presented here. Here, these are called nodes. Each little box is called a node. And you see how many options it allowed us beyond just what was listed in this box. So the use of nodes gives you a lot more possibilities. So whenever you have a chance to use nodes, use nodes. So now, if I go to shading, right now I'm selected the light. So I have the light. And it's an emission. It's a simple emission. It's just a light. If I go over to light, and I just drag this up. This is max brightness. I just drag it up. And you see it's getting brighter? This started at, what was it, 10? 1. Now, I'm actually going to increase the power to, let's say, 100 watts. And I'm going to increase the strength to maybe 100. Okay, not that much. Maybe 10? Maybe 50? Maybe 40? Maybe 30? Maybe 35? 35, that's good. And now I'm going to take the size and shrink it down. And there's the spotlight effect. There's the spotlight effect we were looking for. So the cone was just too big to cover the whole thing. You just gotta shrink it down. Right about there. That looks good. And now, here's another little thing. We'll actually go to layout mode to see it better. You got the size. If you bring the size, that's really just like the edge. You can make it large to where it diffuses over the whole thing, or you can make it small to 0. We have basically just a solid ring, and you could just up it up and kind of fuzz up the edge a little bit if you want it to. What size did we start with? 0.25, yeah. That's pretty good. Maybe a little less. A little more refined of an edge. Right about there. That looks nice. 0.1. Okay. Now here's a little cool thing. You can show the cone. Boom. So what does that look like rendered? Here's your stage. Here's the cone. So let's add a cube, a monkey. Monkey on stage. And don't forget, we angled the stage a bit. We'll bring you over like this. We'll bring you like that. And now, let's show the cone. Boom. Ta-da! And you got cool little tricks. And you can see the ear is like outside the cone, and you're like kind of in, kind of out. Maybe over like that. Let's actually make your X be 0. Boom. And so yeah, so monkey on stage. So yeah, so I might do that later. I might do something with it later, but for now the cone's just gonna get in the way of designing other stuff. So this cone works. The spotlight works, and see a spot up there. But I'm gonna move that. I'm gonna call this center. Let's call it spot center. And I'm gonna move it to lighting. There we go. So now I can disable all of lighting at will. So we have our beginning stage. Now I'm going to show you, I'm going to end with just showing you the actual render of this image. So to render it, you just press F12. And I'll show you F12. And I need to change what window's being. There we go. You can see it now. This is the window that's being rendered, bit by bit. Now each of those little squares that are disappearing, the size of those squares are the tiles that we talked about before. The ones that were like 64x by 64x, now we made it 512 by 512. That's just a way of making the render run a bit faster, saving on time. That's really what the name of the game is, saving on time. So this is our final rendered image. This is the makings of our background. What do you guys think? Not terrible. Not too terrible. That's a good start, at least. And probably next week we'll have better ideas. Next week I won't really need to go into a lot of the shortcuts, because I told you this time. And hopefully I won't be as hungry next time. I am starving. So, let's jump to me. Whew. Well, that was a lot of fun. I like teaching stuff. I hope I'm a good teacher. I hope I'm explaining things like well enough and slow enough or fast enough for your learning. I just find that if you understand what something does and how it can be used and what happens when you don't do something versus when you do, it helps you understand when you can use things better or worse. So, I'm already pushing the time limit as is, but yeah, so next week we're going to be back on Twitch. It'll be our 11th stream total. I think, yeah, 11th stream total. So we'll be back here, and we'll just be continuing this, modeling this background. And then I think, once we finish modeling it, we're going to take a break from it. We're going to go start writing the music of our... Well, we're going to revise the Sunset Venom theme. That should take just one stream. Should take one stream. And then we're going to start composing the music for the waiting screen. And and then we'll get somewhat far there, then we'll jump back over to here, and then we'll animate the background. And then we finish animating the background, we'll finish writing the waiting screen song, and then we'll just jump back and forth. So we're not stuck doing the same thing week after week after week after week after week. You know? Keep it interesting, keep it different. So, that's it for this week. Thank you for watching along, and I really do appreciate it. And until next week, keep on making.